You know, today I would like to look in a passage where Jesus was commending a shrewd steward, a servant. Actually, the story teaches how we can act more wisely or be wiser with our money. It's found in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 16, verses 8 to 9. We read the following. The master commanded the dishonest manager for his shrewdness, for the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of unrighteous wealth. This is a very unusual parable, you know, and often people wonder, what did Jesus really try to say here? You know, when you look in verse 2, for example, in verse 1, we see that this manager was squandering the master's money. He was taking care of a rich man's wealth, and he was simply squandering it. In verse 2, we see that his master found out about it and fired him. In verse 3, he said, I don't know what to do. You know, I'm not able to dig, and I'm too ashamed to beg. So what will I do? And then in verse 4, see, he comes to an idea. He determines to go to each of his master's debtors and reduce their debts. He was hoping that he was going to be welcomed by them once he gets fired. It is interesting. It is really interesting and unusual to read this story, this parable. In verse 8, in the first part, Jesus is saying, the master commended the dishonest manager for his shrewdness. He did not commend him for squandering the money. He commended him for being wise or being shrewd, in other words, having practical sense in using the money to open up opportunity for himself. The master did not agree with the waste, but he was praising how shrewd, how this man was really using opportunities, creating opportunities for himself by the means of money, acting prudently. In other words, using money to soften people's hearts. People in this world often use money to soften people's hearts, to open ways for themselves, to open doors for themselves. And it seems here that Jesus is talking positively about it. It's not about bribes or blackmail, but using money to befriend people. You know, when a boy starts buying gifts to a girl and doing this good and doing that good, taking her out, suddenly her heart goes over to him. She shouldn't marry him because he's buying her gifts, but those gifts and those nice actions certainly have an effect on how she feels about him. The same is done with friends. I've done that even with enemies. You know, I've blessed enemies, and suddenly they've stopped talking against, or they've been softer and more gentle as they were talking about me. A gift opens up a door for the giver. Really, I am a giver. I remember a few years ago when we had to do our first CD for our daughter Sarah. There was one guy who saw her playing in the church, and he said, you know, I'd like to help her create a CD for her. But in the back of his mind, he said to me that later, he thought, I'll do this, and maybe Slobodan's friend, who owns a motorcycle business, will give a motorcycle to him once he hears that he was doing that for free. There were 3 sessions when we recorded that. In the second session, he said God told him, no, do it for God. Don't do it to get a gift. Do it to God. I mean, there's no guarantee my friend was going to give him a gift. I mean, it's ridiculous to think the way he was, but that was in his mindset, he told me. But then when the second session for recording came, he said God told him to do it for God, not for any gift. And he did it for God. He told me that. He even testified on this program saying the same thing. And then the third session was done, and he did a beautiful CD of instrumental worship music of a then 11-year-old Sarah, who did wonderful pieces of music, which were really classical Christian pieces and in a very high level of skill played. But then he said, you know, within a couple of months after he did this for God, he did it, he says, because he knew each CD he sold give. So today, become a giver.